budget?
We have our own special.
Okay, is everybody ready?
Yep.
Ready to go.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Lawrence City Commission meeting. It's about 2 hours until the polls close, so you can duck out and go vote if you haven't done that yet. We're going to go into executive session for about 35 minutes. And so you'll have time to go vote, and you won't miss any of the action or the great public comment that we have. So with that, I would entertain a motion to recess into executive session for 35 minutes.
I move to recess into executive session.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. Vice Mayor Larson, second Commissioner Herbert, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will return in 35 minutes. Everybody ready? Yep. Right. Okay, welcome to our meeting. We were in executive session, and we have returned from that. We have nothing to report. As we open our meeting today, it's with sadness that I say that since our last meeting, we lost a very significant part of our city staff. Fire Chief Mark Bradford passed away. Mark was a respected professional, and he was an expert who led our department for many years. We'll miss him very much, and we extend our sympathy to his family, to city staff, and to all of his friends in our community. So, thank you. Okay. We'll move on to recognition. Can I get somebody to close that door, please? We're going to get a lot of feedback if we leave that open. Thank you. We're going to move on to recognitions and proclamations, and I'm going to turn to Commissioner Ananda for some assistance with our proclamation.
Were we going to read that first or hear from someone first?
Have somebody.
Did we have someone here to speak on behalf of World Breastfeeding Week? Yes, please. You can raise that if you need to.
I'm fine. Okay. My name's Carrie Allen. I'm a WIC breastfeeding peer counselor at the health department, and I'm also the chairperson. Sorry. My name is Carrie Allen. I'm a WIC breastfeeding peer counselor at the health department, and I'm also the chairperson for the Breastfeeding Coalition of Douglas County. And on behalf of the coalition, I thank the city for supporting breastfeeding families and recognizing human milk as the optimal first food. We look forward to working with you to continue building a community where breastfeeding is accepted and valued, where all mothers are fully supported, and where all babies have access to human milk, regardless of social advantage. Let's focus our efforts to eliminate the systemic barriers that create differential experiences for women. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking. And as please go ahead. Did you have
I'd
one?
like to give each commissioner a bag. if that's okay.
Thank you.
We have more of these out. Thank you very much.
So as someone who admitted to about 5.5 years of nursing, I got the opportunity and privilege to read this proclamation. So, whereas the people of Lawrence, Kansas are deserving of good health, and whereas human milk is the preferred and most appropriate first food for infants, adapting over time to meet the changing needs of the growing child and is safe, reliable, and renewable. And whereas breastfeeding is a proven primary prevention strategy, protecting both infants and mothers from a host of chronic and acute diseases and conditions, and building a foundation for their lifelong health and wellness. And whereas employers who provide workplace lactation support experience an impressive return on investment, including lower healthcare costs, absenteeism, and turnover rates, as well as improved morale, job satisfaction, and productivity. And whereas Lawrence continues to work toward a culture where breastfeeding is the norm, promoting, protecting, and supporting families by examining the role of social, economic, and environmental factors that impact breastfeeding. Now, therefore, I, Jennifer Ananda, City Commissioner of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim August 1st through 7th, 2018, to be World Breastfeeding Week and encourage all citizens to support breastfeeding families everywhere and whenever possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ananda. We'll move on now to the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that has been pulled off of the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Are there any items on the consent agenda that a member of the commission would like to have removed? Are there any items on the consent agenda that a member of the public would like to have removed?
There's no more agendas back here, but the one that's about new traffic ordinances.
KT, here you go.
I think she's sharing. I'll get the number.
I think it's 7.
Thank you. 7.
Anything else that a member of the public would like to have removed from the consent agenda?
10.
Is that it? Okay. We have deferred item 6A, so I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda except for items 6A, 7, and 10.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Ananda, a second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Item number 7.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is KT Walsh, citizen. I have a couple of things about transparency, and then I also want to know what's up with the golf carts, which I think is might be really fun. We're not adopting that, but possibly in the future, golf carts in the city. Number one, I have 2 friends who've been pulled over by the police, one for jogging in the street, because the sidewalk in East Lawrence where he was too bad, and you're not allowed to walk in the street or run in the street, and he paid a pretty good fine. Another friend, after an ice storm, was walking in the street and got a ticket for not walking on the icy, snowy sidewalk. That he took a picture of the sidewalk, the district attorney dismissed it, and that sounds petty, but these are all part of the Kansas League of Municipalities traffic ordinances that we accept every year, and every city and town in Kansas does apparently. I can't find them on our website. I can't find them on the police website. You can buy a paper copy in Topeka, or our city can pay $50 so we can put it online. And I have a friend who would like to pay the city for that. She feels like, in terms of transparency, she'd pay the $50 so that this would be online. Because otherwise, the police can write you a ticket, and you can't really look it up and find out what's up with that. I went to the League of Municipalities in Topeka. They panicked and they say, "We can't talk to you. We only talk to cities." And I said, "Well, I'm a citizen." And so they said, "We really can't talk to you." And they stepped back. And they said, "Here's a paper copy." That was a couple of years ago. So anyway, I'm bringing this up because I would love to see it online so we could look up these laws and codes. And I thank you.
Does anyone staff have any information about?
Mayor, I have, in the city clerk's office, we keep copies of that in our office. We haven't subscribed to the electronic copy yet because we do make changes to the traffic ordinance. So for confusion, we have references in the book, and anytime a member of the public wants to view those, I have several copies. And we also provide copies often where we'll make copies and provide them to the public when they call regarding a ticket.
So in the city code, it's just by reference?
Correct.
And then how are the amendments shown in the city code?
Maybe, Maria, do you want to?
I can answer that. In chapter 17, when we amend the standard traffic ordinance, the specific amendment is listed in the code provision. So So you can go to Chapter 17 of the City Code and see our local amendments. It will reference back the particular section of the STO that we're amending, and then it will lay out the language that we're adopting in its place.
Yeah.
They aren't online. I mean, the standard traffic ordinance, the official copy is kept in my office.
So, trying to think. So we've had the citizen raise this, we've had staff response. Perhaps we should have public comment on it?
Stuart, may I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is it my understanding that it's $50 to get that online?
To be honest, I'm not certain how much
Okay.
it is. We've discussed it, we've just never subscribed to the electronic copy.
Okay, and
Why don't you let staff go back and take a look at this, and we'll come back with a report on the issue that's been raised by KT.
Okay. But it seems like if we had the online part, it wouldn't include our local amendments. That's what I'm hearing.
They would be in two separate
Yeah.
locations.
Okay.
You'd have the standard traffic ordinance that and then you'd have to refer to it
Right. Yeah.
from our
Okay.
code back to that.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I guess, again, public comment on this issue.
My problem is with section 30, which changes the age for which a person can obtain additional penalty for having a minor in the vehicle from 14 to 18, which I'm okay with that in theory, but what if it's like two 17-year-olds? Like, is the 17-year-old, like, is the underage drinker that's driving now gonna be getting an additional penalty because he's also out with his buddy who's also 17? Like, I know they have like Romeo and Juliet laws for sexual stuff. Is there any way there could be like some kind of leeway for if you're so many, like within so many years of each other, just because I don't think like, and also what if it's a 17 and an 18-year-old, they're both out drinking. Now instead of like who's ever the best drunk driver drives, it's now, well, the 17-year-old now drives, because then that way he won't get an addition, like a penalty because the passenger's 18, as opposed to if the 18-year-old drives, then the passenger's 17, and there's an additional penalty with that. So, thank you. Oh, and my name was Chris Flowers.
Other public comment? We'll bring it back up to the commission. I think I'm comfortable going ahead and approving this as it is, with the idea that staff will be working to address the concerns that KT posed.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Is that where everybody is? Okay.
And I think to Chris's question, that as I understand it, section 30.1 that gets added, actually, it lessens the penalty. It takes it to where it said that it changed the age from which a person could receive an additional penalty from 14 to 18 years of age. So it actually, so the situation you described was the way it was, which is no longer how it will be.
I concur with that. Yeah.
Is that the case, or is
Yeah,
it that
'cause-
they raise the age for which you can have the penalty from someone under 14 or 14 to under 18 or 18?
No, it's because it says it changes the age for which a person can obtain a penalty for having a minor in the vehicle while driving from 14 years of age to 18.
Correct, so it
So-
covers them up to the age of 18.
Well, the minor is a minor.
Right.
The driver would be,
Maybe we
this
could
would
get-
essentially
can we
remove the
get Tony?
penalty, the additional penalty for those who are under 18.
Can we get Tony to weigh in on that, or somebody?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Maria Garcia, Assistant City Attorney. If you'd like clarification, I can get a copy of the statute, which this is based off of, and just clarify the age I did write here from 14 years of age to 18, but I can look at the exact language from the statute if you'd like, and I can do that just in a few minutes.
I think frankly, for me, it
I'm
discourages
still
underage drinking, one, and then driving with minors in the vehicle after doing so, if that's a choice that an adult makes. So I wouldn't be necessarily interested in modifying that if that were the case.
Yeah, I'm okay with the way it's written, yeah.
I'm okay with the way, I mean,
Thanks, Marie.
are you saying you want to go with the section 30 or
Yeah, with the way it's laid out right here.
the way it's, okay? Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm okay with the modifications that have been shown here. Okay. So I'd entertain a motion.
I would move that we adopt on first reading ordinance number 9522, adopting the 2018 Standard Traffic Ordinance Edition 2018.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Vice Mayor Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Number 10.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michael Allman. I'm a member of the 19th Street Neighborhoods Coalition, and we are glad to see this $20,000 match for the grant from KDOT for this visioning process for East 23rd Street. We see that as a critical link in traffic management for 19th Street, as you well know. And just wanted to point out that there are a couple things that we have mentioned previously I wanted to reiterate for your sake when this process goes forward. One is that we have expressed the desire that the motor vehicle capacity of 23rd Street in the vicinity of Venture Business Park particularly not be reduced. We've gained new capacity since the turnback agreement, and we see that as where the principal access to Venture Business Park should be directed in and out, and the preferred access. Secondly, we have submitted, and it's in the capital improvement plan as an unfunded project, making an entrance to Venture Business Park from 23rd Street at Franklin Road, possibly or maybe preferably with a roundabout as a nice dramatic, major, attractive entrance to kind of cement that whole idea that 23rd Street is the way that Venture Business Park should be primarily accessed. Just wanted to bring that up, and I hope this visioning process, maybe you can confirm that, is going to be a public process with public stakeholders, because the 19th Street Neighborhoods Coalition consider ourselves a stakeholder in that as linked to 19th Street as well.
I think we can confirm that, yes.
Good, thank you.
I'm sure, yeah, go right ahead.
I'm Jessica Mortinger. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner with the Lawrence Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Organization. We were fortunate to have the opportunity to submit for this, among two other grants, to a competitive process for consolidated planning grant funding. KDOT selected this project to award us $80,000 with a $20,000 match to complete a public visioning process that will engagement of stakeholders across the community around what the future of this corridor looks like before the planned reconstruction. And so we're looking forward to this opportunity to revise the existing 23rd Street corridor plan, particularly since K10 no longer serves, 23rd Street no longer serves as K10. We find this to be a really good opportunity to address the multimodal amenities for the future of this corridor.
Thank you, and thank you for securing that grant. Public comment? Okay. Commission discussion? I'd entertain a motion.
Move that we accept the consolidated planning grant funds for a 23rd Street multimodal corridor study and direct staff to issue requests for proposals to complete the proposed planning and design work.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Okay, now it's time for public comment. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues except those scheduled on the consent agenda or regular agenda portions of the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments and questions to the commission. General public comment. Jim?
Are we on the first item now?
No, we're not. No, we're in general public comment. Dr. Domer.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Dennis Domer, 614 East 980 Road, and I request that you add to a regular agenda a discussion about the historic bricks and the limestone curbing that is being pulled up on 9th Street. An awful lot is being pulled up. We know it's about 4 layers down, and it's being loaded into dump trucks and taken to the city brickyard, and I think we need a public discussion about that. There are a lot of questions about it, and I would hope that maybe Mayor Boley would lead a little trip over to the brickyard to take a look at them. These brick were put in about 1909, and they're in really good condition. They probably will last another 500 years, but I think it's a really important discussion to have, and I hope that we can address that as a regular agenda item sometime in the future.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Other general public comment? Okay, we'll move on to our regular agenda items. Our first item is to conduct a public hearing regarding a distance limitation waiver for the 2018 Kansas State Fiddling and Picking Championships. Mark.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Mark Teal, I'm Assistant Public Works Director. Tonight, your first item is to consider 3 actions related to the Kansas State Fiddling and Picking Championships to be held on Sunday, August 26th on Massachusetts Street between North Park Street and South Park Streets. There is proximity to 2 churches for this event that requires you to conduct a public hearing and grant a distance limitation waiver to allow the possession of alcohol with this event. And then you also, tonight, will be adopting on first reading ordinance 9518, allowing the possession, sale, and consumption of alcohol. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Questions for Mark? Okay. So we need to hold a public hearing. I entertain a motion.
I move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Ananda, second from Commissioner Herbert to open the public meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah.
I'm the only one that made this. I'm Jim Jeans,
Hi, Jim.
and I'm with the Kansas State Fiddling and Picking Championship, and I'm just here to answer any questions or concerns that the public may have or the commission might have.
Well, we appreciate you doing the event. Any other questions for Jim?
Long-time tradition.
Yeah, it's always a good one.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Public hearing is open. Other public comment?
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Ananda, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The issue is to find the proximity of a temporary sale of alcoholic liquor for the event is not adverse to the public welfare or safety, and grant a distance limitation waiver and adopt on first reading. Ordinance number 9518.
I would move that we find the proximity of the temporary sale of alcohol is not adverse to the public welfare or safety, and that we grant a distance limitation waiver and adopt on first reading ordinance 9518.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Our second item is to consider approving a comprehensive plan amendment.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Crick with the City County Planning Office. The item before you this evening is an amendment to Horizon 2020, specifically Chapter 8, which would incorporate Transportation 2040, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan for the region, as the transportation chapter of our comprehensive plan. This has been an amendment that we've done twice before. Every time that we get a new Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is every 5 years, we roll it in as an amendment to this to serve as the transportation chapter. Previously, before it, the MTO Policy Board has approved it 5-0, as you can see on March 15th, and the Planning Commission recommended its approval 9-1 on June 27th for you. As far as it goes for the comprehensive plan, this would be the transportation chapter, and it does carry along some aspects that didn't get worked into the land development code, specifically the major thoroughfares map. This is just a way of kind of designating streets as something develops what we anticipate that street to be and carry in the future for capacity and transportation. Ashley Myers with the Metropolitan Transit Organization is also here to talk about Transportation 2040 in that capacity, so I'll let her speak to that.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening. My name is Ashley Myers, and I'm a transportation planner with the Lawrence Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, and I'm here to give a very brief presentation on what Transportation 2040 is. But first of all, MPOs are federally funded and federally required transportation planning agencies for urban areas that have over 50,000 people. And we do transportation planning for the entire county, and we do it for walking, biking, driving, and the bus as well. And Transportation 2040 is one of the federally required plans that we complete every 5 years. And so what is Transportation 2040, or T2040 as we sometimes refer to it? It's a systems plan that looks at all modes of transportation, all types of transportation together. And projects are evaluated by how they fit into the multimodal network. And we're working to fill gaps in this network as well. Transportation 2040 brings together all of the other modal plans that we've done, so the regional pedestrian plan, the countywide bike plan, and the various transit plans as well. And it's a performance-based plan, so it's got a ton of data in it that we'll be doing some annual reports on. Now, this plan is federally required, and we must complete it every 5 years, and also it's fiscally constrained, which means it can't just be a wish list of projects, it has to have money to back it up. Our planning area is all of Douglas County, as I mentioned, and the plan was developed through a steering committee that was developed by the MPO Policy Board. We worked on the plan for about 1.5 years and had lots of public input. We had over 1,600 survey responses and 36 stakeholder interviews, 38 mobile meetings, and 9 open houses. One of the survey questions we asked people was, what should be the main priority of the transportation system? And not surprisingly, the answer was to move people. The plan has 4 goals and some corresponding objectives, and the high-level themes of those goals are access and choices, mobility and prosperity, preservation, safety and security, and sustain and enhance. As I mentioned, this plan brings together all of the other plans that we've done, and so we looked at the existing conditions and identified needs in those other plans to figure out how much money we need out to the year 2040, and we came up with $1.7 billion worth of needs, which is a lot, but we're looking to the year 2040. So then we looked at, well, how much money could we reasonably expect to have? And we looked at funding for Lawrence, Douglas County, all of the other cities, so Lecompton, Eudora, Baldwin, KDOT, KTA, and transit as well, and put all the money together and came up with $1.5 billion worth of projected revenues.
And then federally, we're supposed to subtract out operations and maintenance, which then leaves us with $926 million for projects between now and 2040. Of course, some of those projects are very specific just for transit and things like that. This plan also includes the major thoroughfares map, which is a locally developed map and used for development purposes, and it balances land use and through movement. And how it's used for development purposes is corridor preservation, access management, and roadway design. Then we have more than just projects in the plan. We also have strategies, and some of these strategies are overarching or kind of apply to all modes. And some of those strategies here are to coordinate decision-making to balance land use and environmental impacts, and to have safe and efficient traveling. Then we go into the very specific modes of transportation. So this one's transit. We want to implement the transit comprehensive operations analysis and the bus transfer location analysis, among other transit-related activities. And this plan includes more than just Lawrence Transit and KU on Wheels. It also has the other agencies that provide paratransit, so Independence, Inc., and other ones as well, like the Senior Resource Center for Douglas County. For the pedestrians aspect, we say implement the regional pedestrian plan. And same for the countywide bike plan to implement it. And then for roadways, we say at a minimum maintain existing conditions, design and build roadways for the safety of all users, and deploy technology and other alternative strategies to relieve congestion. My last slide, if you want to find the plan, if you go to lawrenceks.org/MPO/T2040, you'll find it. The image on the very far left is the actual plan, Transportation 2040. Now it is about 450 pages long, but over half of that is public comment and responses we received from the surveys. And then the middle document is the summary. It's 10 pages long, a lot more easily digestible. And then the last one is the interactive mapping portal. We're pretty excited about this. This is the first time we've done this, where anytime you click on a map in the plan, it takes you to this other website where you can zoom in on the data and see it a lot better rather than just on a little map. So staff recommends approval of this requested amendment, and we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Ashley? I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Can you remind me the difference between the major thoroughfares map and the street classification map?
Street classification or the federal functional?
The I think street classification map is the one I'm talking about.
So the major thoroughfares map is just for local use and is for development purposes. The street classification map, I believe that's something different from Public Works. Is that?
Yeah, we went over this a couple weeks ago. We talked about, we were talking about bonding.
Right.
Major thoroughfares versus, the words are so close. But the major thoroughfares was for bonding purposes, and it was just a local issue there. And then what was the other one you mentioned, Mayor?
Street classification map.
Street classification map is what we basically use for design. It's arterials, collectors. So we use those bases for, street widths and sidewalk widths and sidewalks and bike lanes and stuff like that.
It seems to me that there's been some confusion regarding these concepts and how they interrelate, and I know I've had trouble with them. So I guess what I'd like to encourage staff to do is perhaps provide some further education, at least to the commission, maybe to the public, on the different maps that we use in our different planning processes. The second question I have is, how do we amend the major thoroughfares map?
Sure. So the major thoroughfares map is in Transportation 2040. So if we wanted to amend the major thoroughfares map, we would have to amend Transportation 2040. And so there's a 30-day public comment period required and a whole process that's laid out in our public participation plan to do that.
Okay, so is it a one-time thing? Once you adopt the plan, that's it? Or are there like periodic
It's a one-time
revisits?
thing. We can do amendments throughout, in between the 5-year cycles, if we need to.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. Public comment on this issue?
Good evening, Michael Allman again here. Speaking for Sustainability Action Network. And as a organization that supports multimodal transportation, we're very pleased with this plan for the most part. There are some bicycle sections I'd like strengthened, but other than that, I think it's a pretty good job. That's not my concern, though. My concern, well, staff pointed out this major thoroughfares map is a key element, and that's true for making sure that developers comply to our codes. And I believe the plan is also including the various project lists that then goes to the CIP. So it is something that you do need to approve for some of these other processes to go forward. I would agree with that. My concern, however, is not with the major thoroughfares map. Oops, it's with this map. It's called the Population Growth Tiers Map and Transportation 2040. It's the exact same map as a future land use map of Horizon 2040. I brought this up at the Horizon 2040 Steering Committee, the Transportation 2040 Task Force, and the Planning Commission. When I brought this up at the Planning Commission, at least 5 commissioners expressed concerns, and in one case, reservations to the point that he voted against adopting it, simply because it is an entirely new concept that's never been in the comprehensive plan before. It's something that they want thoroughly vetted and discussed to the comprehensive plan. It has not been approved by any governing body. It will be coming to you after the Planning Commission approves Horizon 2040 plan. But until that point, there's no reason and no justification to have it in Transportation 2040. It's not even needed. What the problem is that the area that's green here is indicated for future annexation and development, urbanization. The Planning Commission, the Planning Director said that only indicates potential growth, but right now it's indicating all the way down to the Wakarusa River. It's not only potential, it is under severe development pressure right now from a project that you are litigating, and the city has a staff fighting this in court. So this is more than just potential, and I think this is something that I want to put on your radar for when Horizon 2040 comes your way.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Other public comment? Okay, back to the commission. Thoughts?
Yeah, I'm fine with moving this forward, the process.
And you're on the Horizon 2040?
I'm on the Horizon 2040, yeah.
Okay. Other comments?
I would make a motion then that we approve comprehensive plan amendment CPA-18-00168 to Horizon 2020, Chapter 8, and adopt on first reading Joint City Ordinance Number 9520.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Vice Mayor Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. Our third item is to consider the following items related to 2019 operating and capital improvement budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Danielle Bushcutter. I work in the City Manager's office, and I'm going to kind of kick off the presentation tonight, but we'll have a number of different staff members up here giving different portions of the presentation. So there are a number of different items before you tonight, all related to the budget. We're going to walk through each of these kind of piece by piece. So I'll invite Brian up here. He'll walk through the 18 amended budget. We'll ask you to conduct the public hearing, take action on that item before we move on to the sales tax ordinance, followed by the rate ordinances, and then the 19 budget. So that's kind of how we're going to have the presentation structured. So Brian will review the 18 amended budget as well as the 19 budget. Casey's going to review the sales tax ordinances, and Mike Lawless is going to go over the rate ordinances with you all. So just to kind of get you up to speed, it's been a while since we've met. So this is the general process that we have gone through up to this point. At our last meeting on July 17th, that was the point in which we set the maximum expenditure limit, and that's also when you all authorized publication of the budget in the local paper. So that's all we really have on kind of process-wise. If you guys have any, unless you have any questions, we'll go ahead and jump into the first item. Okay, I'm really just going to pass it off to Brian, and he's going to walk through the 18 amended budget.
Thank you. The first item this evening is to review the 2018 adopted budget amounts, the expenditures, to open up for public hearing to hear public comment regarding the increase in expenditures for 8 funds. The list of funds here: the general fund, library, capital improvement reserve fund, the 3 economic development funds that we've talked about, City Parks Memorial, and Housing Trust. Just want to put those quickly up there for the discussion. As part of the 2019 budget, obviously we need to make sure that 2018 expenditure and resources and end-of-year fund balances are accurate going into 2019 in order to set our 2019 budget expenditures. These 8 funds, during the process, we realized there were some revisions that need to be made, and so these would need to be, these expenditures would need to be increased in order to have the fund balances going forward into 2019 as we projected. I'd be happy to address any of the specific funds. We've been over them a few times, but I understand it has been a few weeks since we've discussed.
Any questions for Brian? Thank you, Brian. So we need to do a public hearing.
Yes, I would.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion.
I move to open a public hearing.
Second.
And this is a public hearing regarding the 2018 City of Lawrence amended budget. We have a motion from Vice Mayor Larson, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor? Aye. The hearing is open.
Public comment.
Public comment, hearing is open. Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I thought I would.
I'd entertain a motion.
Move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Vice Mayor Larson. All in favor?
Aye.
So now we need to consider adopting on first reading ordinance number 9553, increasing the 2018 expenditure authority. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, any commission discussion on this?
No, I'm fine with what we've put together, what staff
Okay.
has put together.
Yeah, I think, I had raised comments around the 200,000 under the housing authority, and I think that in the future, we do have an opportunity to do something really unique with this fund, with these funds. Theoretically, we won't have them in the future, but if we do, thinking more around process for making that happen, and, I think it's a unique opportunity where we could really reach out to the community and get some really unique, one-time, phenomenal ideas, or, just have some sort of proposal process that would open this up. But I also acknowledge the importance of the program that you all were interested in funding. And at this point, it's pretty late in the game. But just for future issues like this that might arise, which again, hopefully they don't, but to think through what we might do with those that might be a little broader or a little more equitable as far as opportunity goes.
Now, this is the raising of the expenditure, it's not expending the funds, just for clarification, right?
Correct. Right?
These are just allowing you to expend those funds. It does
Right.
not increase any fees or additional revenues. These are mostly from the fund balance carried forward from previous years.
Is, okay, okay. So do we
Yeah,
have a motion? Remind me where we are, Vice Mayor.
yeah, we do not have a motion.
Okay.
We do not.
Other comment before
Yeah,
we,
make any other comments?
appreciate the help.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, participatory budgeting is always something really intriguing, and we have advisory committees that kind of work through that now. So if there's something special that we want to allocate in the future, an advisory board is definitely a good way to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Okay.
course, a global citywide event would always be really fun too, but that would take a lot of staff time.
Yes, it would. I think we'd have to volunteer to step that.
Okay.
All right, I make a motion to adopt on first reading ordinance number 9553.
Second.
We have a motion from Vice Mayor Larson, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Brian.
Good evening, Mayor and Commission. Casey Toomey, I'm an Assistant City Manager with the city. Our second item tonight is a number of ordinances related to the 3 sales tax provisions that were approved by voters in November of last year. Just to recap, in July of 2017, you all authorized submitting 3 questions to the voters. 2 were renewing existing sales tax provisions, and 1 was repurposing the .05 sales tax that had previously been for transit to affordable housing initiatives. In November of 2017, voters did vote to approve all of those sales taxes, and our governing body has the authority to levy those special purpose sales taxes by ordinance. Keep in mind, these sales taxes will become effective April 1st of 2019 and will sunset after 10 years. And there are 3 of those, 3 ordinances, 1 for each sales tax provision. And then finally, related to this item, you all directed staff to come back to you with an ordinance to retain the Sales Tax Audit Committee. The existing code language that created that committee specifically referenced the 2008 sales tax. So we have an ordinance for you tonight to consider. So here are the sales tax action items that we're requesting. You can see there, I won't read all of those, but we're requesting that you adopt those on first reading. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Casey? Thank you, Casey. Public comment on this issue? Back to the commission.
I would go ahead and, did you have any comments? Okay, move that we adopt on first reading ordinance 95, 49, 50, 51, and 52.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Ananda, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Mike Wallace with Municipal Services and Operations to talk about utility rates. Kind of as we showed earlier, we have completed our update of the water and sewer rate model, and we came in about where we told you. We're slightly less than the 8% that we had shown previously, and you can see roughly 3.8% of that is for operations and maintenance and debt service, and then about 4% is for our capital improvement program. Stormwater is unchanged from what you've seen previously, with a 3% increase or 13% per ERU, and then there was no change in solid waste rates. For the water rate structure for 2019, the last time I presented rates, I thought that we would have our billing system all in place that would allow us to do the individual inclining block rate for residential water rates. Since then, I have become educated on what it takes to implement a new billing system, and right now that project is not scheduled to be completed until October of 2019, or that's when it will be operational. So once again, we're going to maintain the uniform rate for residential customers. We'll continue the irrigation rate that we implemented this year that would be equal to the residential rate. And then over the course of the next year, we'll begin our educational outreach on the new individual inclining block rate that would be ready for 2020 residential rates. And that would be a 3-tier rate. And in that rate structure, irrigation rate would then be equal to the highest, or block 3 rate. Here's just a quick comparison of area bills for water and sewer. For Lawrence, that equates about, to go from the 2018 rate to the 2019, proposed 2019 rate, that would be about $4.89 for the typical residential customer. And then the rest of those that you see are either actual or proposed rates for that same quantity for the surrounding communities, with the exception of BPU, which still has a 2018 rate on it. And then here's an area bill comparison for the stormwater ERU rate. And you can see the 2018 and proposed 2019 rate for Lawrence. You see some of the cities listed there are a little bit different than what we had for the water and sewer, and that's because in Johnson County, Water One and Johnson County Wastewater provide service to all the communities, and the stormwater is then located in each individual community. So that's why a little bit of difference in the communities that you see there. And in this slide, only Olathe and Manhattan are we showing proposed rates for 2019. The revenue increase for O&M is to support our operations and maintenance, and that includes increased raw water costs, our capital equipment replacement program, software maintenance fees, and our debt payments for prior projects. For the CIP, the increased revenues will help support maintenance of our infrastructure. These are things that we've kind of talked about before. So doing things that repair things that have already been deferred or what is currently wearing out, responding to regulatory mandates and public health, including source water protection. That's kind of a new one that we've undertaken this year out at our participation in the Milford project, as well as some upstream improvements that we're working with the Upper Wakarusa Raps at Clinton. And then certainly efficiency and quality of service.
On this 4%, are these cash projects?
No, there's a mixture of cash and debt for these. For 2019, we're looking at about $1 million in cash, and then the rest of it would be financed through debt.
Okay, because there was a bonded indebtedness portion in the 3.8.
That's to
And
pay for existing.
Okay, so
for
this
existing
would be
debt.
for new bond?
Correct.
Okay.
Is this just wastewater and water?
That is correct.
That's just it.
And then I think this is a slide that you saw in previous presentations, and we've just updated it with the new rate information. And for 2019, that equates to about a $69 increase or 4%. And for action items tonight, it would be adopting ordinance 9521 for water and wastewater rates and 9555 for stormwater rates.
Questions for Mike? Thank you, Mike. Public comment on this issue?
Hello, once again, Michael Almonds, speaking for myself. I appreciate, I think I appreciate, I'm not quite clear, but staff's efforts to address irrigation rates, particularly as a person who engages in local urban agriculture. At the time of adoption of our urban agriculture ordinance, and then I believe at least 2 budget hearings, I brought up the concern about how people who are engaged in local food production could have some kind of additional support through, lower water rates. Yesterday we got 3/4 inches of rain. Hallelujah. It didn't make a dent in the drought. We are in at least a 1.5 year drought. People like myself who are trying to grow food, severely handicapped. And so what I'd like to know is what this 3-block rate structure would be, how properties would be delineated that would get an irrigation rate. For instance, how would it be separated from residential use, from what you then use for your food garden? It's very unclear. Is it something to do with the advanced metering infrastructure? Or I'd like an explanation how that would work. And if it's possible that me, in a residential property, would have a portion of my bill for irrigation at a lower rate. I'm not sure how it would work. I'd like to know. Thanks.
Okay, the inclining block rates are going to go in 2020?
Correct.
Okay, and maybe you can speak a little bit about the inclining block rates.
Well, first of all, as I indicated earlier, I think over the course of the next year to 15 months, we've got to do a good job of getting the word out and educating the ratepayers on how does an inclining block rate work, what is it, how will it affect them, and those are all things that we'll begin working on to be ready and have that done by the time we go to implement those. Just a little bit about an inclining block and how it works, or how we propose to set it up. Right now, if you have an irrigation meter, you would be charged the irrigation rate for water, but it has no sewer component on an irrigation meter. So all you pay for is the water that goes through the meter. For a residential customer, typically you don't see residential customers that have a separate meter for irrigation. And so how the inclining block rate will work is that we look at the average winter average winter water consumption during the winter, and we take that and we say that is your base water use. And then as the rates are implemented, the block 1 rate, or the lowest rate, would be up to 125% of that winter average usage. Block 2 would be up to 200%, and block 3 would be anything over 200% of that average winter consumption. But at the same time, you would be charged sewer on that. So like if you're a commercial business, you would get, and you have a domestic meter and an irrigation meter. On the domestic meter, you pay water and sewer based on usage, and then irrigation is just water based on usage.
So how does one go about getting a meter for the irrigation? How do they know they need one?
Well, I mean, anybody can apply to have an irrigation meter, but by having that irrigation meter, you would have to pay the system development charges because we would have to be able to supply the water equal to whatever that meter can supply. So you would be taking up a portion or part of the capacity that our system has by having that additional meter. So if your residential meter is adequate to provide domestic use and irrigation use, you're probably better off with just the domestic meter, because we allow the average winter consumption to be your sewer portion of the bill.
Thanks.
And you're going to be doing a lot of education on this, because these are
Correct.
not real easy concepts to grasp.
That is correct. We'll be doing an outreach. There'll be website information and information on the social media or whatever we can to get the word out.
Thanks, Mike. Other public comment? Back to the commission.
I guess I'd make these comments as a ratepayer and not, stepping outside of the city commission. I think there's things that the city commission and our budget pays for that people always have a tendency to kind of roll their eyes on and may view as wasteful. But I will tell you that clean water is never going to be one of those things. That as a ratepayer, I'm happy to pay what it takes to make sure that we have state-of-the-art infrastructure, to make sure that we have the highest possible quality. We've seen all over the country instances where neglect of this form of infrastructure has had catastrophic results and continues to have catastrophic results. So wastewater and drinking water in Lawrence, Kansas, I think is something we should be incredibly proud of. So thank you for your work on that, and I'm happy to support increases that are required to pay for this level of infrastructure.
I am reminded that we have the top, I believe it's top ASI ratings for our fire coverage. Is that what the ratings are called? ISO ratings, I'm sorry. ISO ratings. And there's a part of that, a significant part of that, that's due to the work of our fire crews, and I think Chief Bradford was here when we went from that ISO 2 to ISO 1. But another component of that is the utility system. You've got to be able to have the water there to be able to put the fires out. So it's the combination of a couple of different departments that have brought us lower insurance rates to our community that everybody's benefiting from. So I second your comments, Commissioner Herbert. This is, may be tough for some of the folks, but we need to support the basic services of our city, and this is one of them.
Yeah, I'm going to speak about it in commission items, but 2 of the tours of departments that I took since I started were with the wastewater treatment and the water treatment, and they are phenomenal programs. And I was taken through every step, given an opportunity to see the facilities, both here and Clinton. And I was just really blown away with the care that is taken, with the emphasis on saving not only as much money as possible, but reducing the amount of things that they have to do to the water. Is a very complex process. It's the ingenuity and engineering involved in it is amazing. So for me, it was just fascinating generally. But I really did see, staff that is committed to making safe water for our community.
Yeah, I would echo Matt's or Commissioner Herbert's comments regarding clean water. I don't think we pay enough for it sometimes myself. I do want to point out that I think it was last year we talked about this rate structure, I believe it was. And one thing that I'm glad to see is that we're kind of in the middle tier for when you compare it to other cities around us as far as our costs go. And I remember Brian talking about it last year, how it's important that instead of holding or not raising your rates as costs go up and waiting 4 or 5 years to raise your rates, then all of a sudden you get a big, large increase. Instead, what we're doing is kind of gradually raising them to keep up with the cost of doing business, and I think that's really important that we do this. I know it's hard to accept those every year, but unfortunately, the cost to do business keeps going up, and so we have to keep up with that.
Okay.
Sherry, would you like these as two separate motions?
You can adopt both of those in one motion.
Okay. I would then make a motion that we adopt on first reading ordinance 9521 and 9555.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
And finally, this evening, is the adoption or the consideration of reading the first ordinance of adopting the 2019 budget and the tax levy associated with it. In order to do that, you first must publish the budget, or notice public hearing, which we did, within 10 days of tonight's meeting, and then also hold a public hearing to listen to comments from your citizens. Just a broad overview. Again, Danielle had gone over the various meetings, so just want to reiterate the total operating expenditures tonight that you're considering for the first reading is $206,653,000. Of that amount, the general fund is $77,664,000. It does maintain the current mill levy rate of 33.279 mills. And the expenditures that are included in the notice of public hearing and in the certificate that you'll adopt also includes fund balances. And I think we've discussed that before, just the way that the state forms are put together. In order to have the full spending authority in there, we also add the fund balances carrying forward. So it actually moves the total expenditures of 2019 plus ending fund balances to $280,410,000. I'll take, again, just the role of a city commission during the budget process is twofold for this hearing. One is to adopt the maximum expenditures, and that's the first part of that, the $280 million that I talked about. And then the second part is to adopt the maximum tax levy for the budget. So I just wanted to just show and remind the commission that we have 3 tax levy funds: general fund, the debt service fund, and the library fund. And then you see the mill levies: 19.929 mills for general fund, debt service of 9.31, and the library of 4.04. So with that, we would recommend that you hold a public hearing, and then once the discussion is complete, then to adopt on first reading the ordinance for the budget, and also that ordinance also adopts the capital improvement program for 2019 to 2023.
Questions for Brian? Thank you, Brian. So we need to conduct a public hearing on the 2019 budget.
Move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is open on the 2019 city budget.
Hello again, my name is Katie Walsh. I believe I'm speaking on the capital improvement budget. I'm here representing the East Lawrence Neighborhood Board. We voted last night to have me come and ask you this. We wanted to say that we want to thank publicly the Parks and Rec staff and the Parks and Rec Board for putting the Water Splash Park back in their budget request. This is the splash park to be at 15th and the Burrows Creek Trail. It has been in the long-range plans for the loop and the trail for 9 years, and our climate is only getting hotter, as we've all experienced. So we are thrilled and certainly don't mean to seem ungrateful, but this amenity to the loop is scheduled for 2023, which is 5 years from now. The ELNA board is requesting that it be moved to 2019 or 2020, and here's why. The only cooling water features on the east side of Lawrence, the only cooling water feature on the east side of Lawrence was the country club pool by the fairgrounds, owned by the neighborhood, and it closed this year. Perhaps Parks and Rec would like to take it over. The daycare kids from our low-income housing on Haskell have to take 2 buses with a 15-minute wait in the heat to transfer to get to the South Park wading pool. Cyclists, walkers, families, wheelchair users can all cool off in the accessible splash park right off the trail by the playground. Please remember, this is part of the Lawrence Loop, and our kids on the east side need a place to play and laugh and cool off. Thank you.
Thanks, KT. Other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Donna Giesler, and I live at 6212 West 22nd Court. I am aware that the proposed 2019 budget that will be approved tonight does not include funding to address the flooding issues at 8th and Ohio that were discussed at the last commission meeting. I would request funding consideration be given to this urgent need. It appears to me that by replacing 75 feet of stone stormwater line from the inlet behind 800 Ohio to connect to an existing 72-inch round reinforced concrete pipe running down 8th Street from this point and connecting to a 96-inch round reinforced concrete pipe on Tennessee would eliminate the constriction that is causing the flooding near 8th and Ohio. Residents at 8th and Ohio should not have to endure structure flooding through another budget cycle and should not have to build walls and ditches and drains to try to reroute surface water from their properties. Later this evening during the city manager's report, another option for fixing the flooding will be discussed. That option has been quoted at $600,000 and appears to me to place 275 feet of pipe along the route of the old stone line, not shown on this current map, but running here to here and then on up to Tennessee. I printed this map this morning. The 2018 budget had only one Group 3 Stormwater Master Plan capital project for $275,000. And the proposed 2019 budget includes only one capital project for $1 million that was not in the master plan. If replacing 75 feet of this stone line would correct the flooding problem with less capital, I ask that you find some way to fund this immediately and to alleviate the flooding near 8th and Ohio. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Giesler. Other public comment? I'd entertain a motion.
Move that we close public hearing.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, back to the commission.
Is it possible to, obviously this public comment has come up about the 8th and Ohio flooding issue. Is it possible to incorporate part of your city manager report presentation onto that, into this conversation? Because I know your city manager's report, as was indicated in public comment, addressed some cost numbers and.
Yes, we can do that. I think what I would suggest is we have a fairly comprehensive PowerPoint ready in case the commission had these kinds of issues come forward. So we can parse that and pull out a specific comment about the public comment that was made this evening on that particular section at this time, and then go through the PowerPoint during the manager's report.
Let's do that.
So just pull that particular item out
If that's what the
and
commission
have
wants
that
to do.
conversation.
To do the whole presentation at that
No,
point?
just to do the section
address the
regarding the
section.
budget
Right,
issues so that we
yeah,
can get
yeah,
through that.
Right.
That's fine,
Okay.
yeah.
So at this point, I'd ask Mr. Bond to come forward and maybe pull that up on the screen and talk about it from the slide that you have on that issue, if you can find it.
Let me go through the whole PowerPoint, or just that one slide?
Just that area that was mentioned during public comment, and then if you can respond. Our recommendation was more elaborate than that section that Ms. Geisler commented on. She talked about the 75 feet. Why would we or why wouldn't we do that compared to our recommendation?
Well, for starters, we'd end up with, the blue portion of is exactly what she had just shown. To actually implement all of Project 23, that would incorporate the rest of what is shown in purple on here. And so that is under capacity according to what we had for the Stormwater Management Master Plan. We ran through some preliminary numbers as far as that entire piece goes, and it was rough $600,000. So that's a real high level view of what that would entail. The other appropriate piece would be to remedy the situation where it goes through the parcels on the east side of Ohio, between the alley in Ohio itself, and then go down the existing street right away of 8th Street, and then down Ohio itself. The way it was originally proposed in the 96 master plan was followed in some form or fashion. It's hard to tell off of this drawing. I thought that'd pop up a little better, but the white line that heads along the south side of 812 Ohio and then basically follows the alley. One of the things that the master plan didn't include in its is it didn't know that the house was built over the top of the existing storm sewer line. And then one of the other recommendations that I would make is, instead of getting so close to the existing sanitary sewer line that we have that runs down the middle of the alley, is to go ahead and get that out into the right-of-way where it could be more easily constructed, and then in future maintenance problems you wouldn't have a conflict with the sanitary sewer going to the alley, and it'd make it a lot easier to maintain and to actually construct.
Does that address the question in your minds?
So is that the $600,000 that project?
600,000 is the blue line and the purple line.
But the question, Matt, is, Geisler said, why don't you just fix the 75 feet? So what's your answer to why not just fix the 75 feet?
So the flow, because it's about flow.
Does
at
that take
point.
care of the restriction? Does
Yeah,
that take
would-
care of
that
the,
would- that
does
would
that take
definitely-
care of the capacity
That
issue?
would take care of the capacity issue and reduce the localized flooding.
So why aren't you recommending that?
Because the long-term solution with that is you can't just fix that one little piece, you're gonna end up having capacity issues for the purple line as well. You wanna fix you don't want just a Band-Aid solution, you wanna fix the entire piece of the puzzle there.
What size is the purple line?
It's a 6x6 box. And so is the blue line. In fact, all of the lines shown you're gonna end up with roughly a 6x6 box. I haven't gone through all of the detailed hydraulics, but that's what was originally included in the master plan. And based off some rough calculations I've made, yes, that's gonna solve the problem.
The problem in just pulling this particular section out is contextual. So not only is there context to the other parts of this improvement, some of these issues in the bigger picture of this particular project are realignment issues. Some of them are, as pointed out by the public speaker, capacity issues. But then the other part of the context is, how do these compare? This isn't the only part of town that has structural issues. And then we have found other projects, quite frankly, that weren't on that plan that Matt would have gone through in his full PowerPoint. So there's context on this particular line or this particular project, but then there's context related to competing projects and what is the priority. And quite frankly, there's equal groups of neighbors that will be before you, challenging why their project isn't picked or why this one is, back and forth. So contextually, that is why we go through a capital projects process to discuss these things and try and prioritize them as best we can. Now, what I would say to you is that this project is probably moving up in priority for us, in part because, as Matt indicated from the last meeting that we had this conversation, that we are now aware that there is some structural flooding component, and that in itself moves it up the priority ladder for our consideration. But contextually, we still need to go through the process to evaluate how these things all compare with all the other projects, not just on that capital improvement, but others that we have been made aware of since that 96 plan was put in place, that actually have probably more priority than some of the projects than some of the projects that are in that list now.
But we have the master plan, and at any point in time, was this master plan, did the commission say, no, we don't want to follow it, we want to do a different plan?
No, but Commissioner, there are projects, quite frankly, that the plan didn't contemplate.
Oh, I realize that.
That are tangential to projects inside the plan. And if you don't take care of those things as you make those improvements, one is the, what's the name? Pardon?
Naismith Ditch.
Yeah, the Naismith Ditch. If you don't take care of that, you're going to run up significantly more costs and cause additional more damage just by making that improvement, because it wasn't contemplated that the ditch liner needs to be improved as well, or you're going to blow it out, and that's going to cost you even more money. So those things, you know, that plan is that. It's a plan, okay? It is not cast in stone, just like the budget is not rigid in stone, that you're going to have things that'll happen during the course of the year that you're probably going to have to address that you didn't initially contemplate, and something's going to give because that took place.
Other questions? Comments?
While you're here, I don't want to stray from the budget topic, but on this particular project, if you were to run the line, sorry, I'm going to have to look at this so I can actually read. If you were to run the line up 8th and then down Ohio, would the plan be effectively to abandon that section of line, which leads to my question of what sort of liability does the city take on with an abandoned line underground that potentially, I mean...
With regards to liability, I'll let city...
I mean, you have a house sitting on top of it, right?
But if you're going to abandon line when we've done it in the past, is you fill it full, flow will fill, because you've essentially taken that line out of service and you don't want to be responsible for
You cap each
its
end and fill it.
deterioration.
Okay.
So,
Well, I can appreciate this moving up the priority list, but I'd like to know when it's going to be worked on then. What's the estimated timeline?
It's going to be reevaluated for the next CIP project or list that comes out. And now that I know that we actually have structural flooding at this location, it's definitely going to move up, as city manager indicated.
Does that mean next year?
No.
The budget you're approving is
It's
for
next
next
year.
year.
It's
So
next year.
it would have to be, as a part of the 2020 budget conversation, would be the earliest that it could be considered. And the other thing, individuals are concerned about how fast this is going to get done. Talk about the lead time it takes for you to do the engineering, do the construction document, and get it out to bid, and then when this is likely to happen.
So for a complex project, as this one is, you're looking at 6 to 9 months of surveying and engineering work and design. And then after that, you got to make sure all the utilities out of the way. So depending upon what utilities are in conflict with the proposed alignment, you're looking at anywhere from 3 months to a year for them to get out of the way, because they don't have this forecast on their radar right now. And then you're looking for another 9 months to 12 months for actual construction. And that's if I got the go-ahead today. So you're looking at least 2.5 years out, potentially, to actually get the project completed.
So for the budget that we're approving now for next year, is there any funds in there at all related to that? So if we
Not
wanted.
for this project, no.
So if we wanted to add this project, we would have to remove another project.
Yeah, but I would, as the city manager indicated, I would advise against that, because you've got 2 other Group 1 projects that are currently in the CIP, and they're Group 1 projects because they were identified as having structural flooding as well. When they put the plan together, had they known this was a Group 1 or had structural flooding, I would imagine that it would have been a Group 1 project. The fact that I know that it's now has structural flooding, it has definitely moved way up in the priority list.
How about you walk through those slides?
You want to go all the way?
Just about the CIP slides, the group 1, 2, 3, just so that everybody's speaking the same language.
So the 96 master plan identified 3 different groups of projects, with Group 1 being the highest priority. And those were cases where they had recurring residential or commercial structural flooding. On Group 2, these were more of safety issues as far as emergency access. So the reason that 23rd and Osdale obviously is a Group 2 project, it was the only one that's been done to date, but 23rd Street is the only way to get across the east to west side of town on one thoroughfare. And then Group 3 are more erosion, nuisance, maintenance issues. And we've done more Group 3 projects to date than we have Group 1, because they're usually the lower hanging fruit, the smaller budgeted projects that we can either do in-house or do supplemental to some other project. For instance, if you did a Group 3 project and we happen to be replacing the street through that piece, we went ahead and picked up the storm sewer, because you don't want to tear up a new street to put in the storm sewer just because of grouping. So a lot of those priorities are based off of things of that nature. So just to go back through the projects that we have on the current list, once again, 13th and Brook, that's a smaller project, but that's something that we're going to do in-house with our own engineering, our own surveying, our own crew. The drainage channel jumped up in onto the radar because, as the city manager had expressed, we have concrete slope protection failures on that channel. If we get water underneath there on a big flood event, it's going to peel up those 4x8 sheets of concrete and potentially cause localized scouring around the bridges. We could lose, I'm posting doom and gloom here, but this is reality. When you get flash flooding, we could lose the slopes on both the south and northbound lanes and potentially lose the street itself. The other reason it is where it is on the priority list is the 17th and Alabama project actually dumps into the Naismith drainage channel, so it's sequential as far as that goes. 21 sees the concrete channel that's west of Arrowhead. For a similar instance, it's a concrete ditch line channel. It's in a residential neighborhood, I'm worried about the same thing there. We get concrete pops up in different form or fashion, you get localized flooding, and you could end up with structure flooding of houses over there. So that's why it's where it is. And then 19th and Maple is the second of the group projects that we've got for CIP, so that's the reason it is where it's at. And then, as the city manager had said, all of these things are meshed together, so all your potential projects are measured against one another for structural flooding, public safety and access and maintenance, and then you try and take a comprehensive approach to the entire watershed. So that's illustrated by the fact that we need to do the ditch on Naismith Channel prior to doing 17th Street. And then, as I said earlier, for surveying, on depending upon what projects you've got for engineering and design, it's anywhere from 6 to 12 months in design, another 3 to 12 months for utility relocation, and then construction 6 to 12 months. So.
Thank you, Matt.
I think this is why people get frustrated with our budget. You know, we have something that's a clear issue, and then we turn around and, no offense to Parks and Rec, but we're funding, you know, repaving Parks and Rec parking lots over something like this. That's why priority budgeting is going to be, I feel like, so important to us in the future.
It seems also that making sure we stay on top of these master plans, if they need to be changed, they need to be changed. And they, obviously, that's part of the whole process, but it just looking over this for the past couple of weeks, it seems as though we did not work on any of these projects for a period of almost 8 years, something like that, where there was nothing done on the list. So,
well, that's not we have done 3 projects on the list in the last couple of years.
Yeah, the last couple of years, but there was a period there of about 8 years where nothing was done.
Well, from 2006, I think, is when they finished up the 13th and Oregon project, and that's when I started as stormwater engineer. And you're right, we had double bond payments because we were paying off the other projects. But your point is well made as far as the needing of an update for the master plan. And so one of the things that we did last fall was purchase the TV truck. And so that's going to allow us to identify all of our existing assets that we have in the ground today. And so the rate memo I had covered a lot of that. And so with that, we also are doing a condition of assessment of all of those assets. And so that's ongoing right now. But then the next piece of that would be to do a comprehensive hydraulic model once we know what we physically have in the ground. And I guarantee you the camera truck, I don't mean to be a doom sayer here, but the camera truck's going to find some additional problems we got out there that we don't know about today. And then after we've developed a comprehensive hydraulic model, then we'll develop our concept plans and cost estimates, and then we'll end up with developing a CIP and prioritize that. And then we'll develop a rate model so that we can fix those problems, and then our final piece will be the implementation of the CIP and talk exactly, or address exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
So when you say rate model, you mean raising the rates?
Yes.
So when I look at the CIP on page 5, I don't know if there's any way for y'all to bring it up. I'll be patient.
Under the stormwater fund? Is that what you're looking at?
I'm looking at, yeah, page 5. Are those all enterprise funds then that are strictly revenue that's coming in is staying in the stormwater fund? What I'm getting at is that if we wanted to accelerate projects being worked on, it's not possible through the enterprise fund, and we would have to find another revenue source.
You mean come up with additional funding for that? Well, that would mean we'd end up with more debt service.
Within the stormwater fund?
Well, our annual revenue is just a little over $3 million a year. So I let Brian speak to how it accelerated.
I will say, of the 4 projects, Matt had just mentioned the 4 projects, Naismith Drainage Channel, the 17th Alabama Drainage Improvement, the Concrete Channel. Those 3 are cash funded in here. This $2 million for the 19th Maple to Brook, actually we do have that identified, that we would have to issue debt for that, because at that point the fund would be in the red, since we're cash funding these 3 projects. So that 4th project would be debt funded.
And the debt service would be out of the stormwater fund?
Correct. I believe it's approximately $260,000 that would add to the debt service in that fund.
Would that use up our fund balance too? The 3.3 million? I think we got 3.3 million fund balance.
Yeah, so basically we have built up a couple $1 million in fund balance in that fund in order to do these 2, basically these 3 projects, the Naismith, 17th in Alabama, and the west of Arrowhead, Princeton to Peterson. Those were identified to be cash funded, and that will deplete that fund balance again. And then, which is what happened last time. We, as you just addressed, that it was cash funded, then we issued debt when we got to 0, and then it's pretty significant debt payments there for a while. Those have dropped off. We've built up some cash balance. We're going to cash fund these, and then out in 2023, the project would be debt funded. 2022.
So the fund balance for this fund, is it, you keep saying that it'll be low, do you mean all the way to 0, or do you mean the 22%?
Yeah, in 2023, I'm sorry, 2022, oh, thank you. Thank you, Dana. I can't help but remind the commission what it's like to have a position of Danielle, especially her quality in getting stuff is amazing. So this black line here is the fund balance in that fund. Mm-hmm. And so it's not 5 million, it's like 3 million, I believe.
It's 3.3.
Thank you. 3.3. And then it's fairly steady, but then you see starting in 2020, the expenditures are quite a bit higher than the revenues. And so that's us cash funding those large projects. And so you see the fund balance depleting almost to 0 in 2022.
So those kind of charts inform you as to where you're headed and cause you to think of alternative courses of action. And one of them might be that you're going to have to raise the rates to offset that more than what you might have been expected to do. So, or cut a project out, swap a project.
Or take on more debt. Not that I'm not proposing that.
I would have Brian comment about that. I think Brian has been, I wouldn't say even conservative, but he's been very careful about how much debt we get ourselves into. So those projects, as he indicated, were cash funded rather than debt issued.
Right. Right.
Well, if there's a way that we can figure out how to do this, I would like to.
How was the, and I know you weren't in your position in 1996, but do you have any idea how the determination was made that there wasn't structure flooding in 1996 at this location?
They had several surveys and public meetings and public hearings, and that's how they gathered all of their information.
Okay.
You know, I just look at I'm looking at the master plan comprehensively, and with the understanding that things change, I realize that. But when I look at the projects that have been done over the last 21 years, a project in Group 2 wasn't done until 20 years into the master plan, when that was really the second tier that was supposed to be done. So I just find that very concerning that we either, I don't know if we just didn't stay on top of it or just other things obviously got in the way. But when we have a master plan, if it needs to be changed, it needs to be changed. But if we still have that, then it seems like there should be a more concerted effort to make sure we're working these things based on what the master plan has laid out. And I'm looking at only one number 2 project done in 20 years, and it was just done last year.
I would reiterate, yeah, I mean, to me, we were talking about it today and yesterday, and to be honest, I'm surprised that 23rd and Oslo wasn't a Group 1 project. I think the reason that it wasn't is because there wasn't getting any structure damage. Now, I haven't talked to anybody at Perkins, but anybody that's gone through that intersection, in fact.
Yeah, I know it's a bad one.
It's been a while since it's looked like that, thank goodness, because we fixed it. It doesn't look like that anymore. And we got a good test of it on August 22nd of last year. And we didn't even have it curb to curb, it was dry. So that is exactly the kind of stuff, obviously, that we don't want to have happen. And I don't want structure flooding, nobody does. I've gone through house flooding myself, and it's not pleasant at all. But to your point, yes, moving forward, that's what we want to do. That's one of the reasons we got the TV truck, because I don't want to be reactive, I want to be proactive. I want to know what we've got out there, and if we have a potential where we have a storm sewer that's in disrepair and I don't know about it, and then all of a sudden it collapses overnight, and then we've got an emergency situation. So that's, you know, the first step is identifying what we have in the field, making a good assessment of that, and then starting forward with a good hydraulic model, and then start into a new plan to make sure that we address these.
I guess I'd like to come back to the matter at hand, which is, are we going to adopt on first reading ordinance number 9521, ordinance number 9555, or do we want to make some kind of change?
Is it the cap that we'd be raising? Where are we at in our budget? Or are we finalizing?
I mean, are we interested in changing our budget, or are we interested in doing something else?
Is this our cap?
The dollar amount, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
Are we
yes.
capping it tonight?
Yeah.
Or didn't we already cap it?
We already capped it.
It's been
We
capped.
did that last
So now
last
this
time.
is just
This is adoption.
Yeah,
authority.
this is adoption of the budget and the CIP and as it's written.
It's approving and appropriating the 2019 City of Lawrence operating and the 2019 to 2023 capital improvement budget.
So does this exist in the CIP anywhere?
What, it is, no, this was,
It's just a completely standalone document.
Yeah, but it is comprised of all the information in the, as far as the CIP as well as projects done. I think there's going to be more discussion on that later. More explanation of it.
In the city manager's report, you mean?
No, this is a citizen's document, right here, Leslie.
So are you saying we should finish this tonight or another night?
Well, there is, minor, at the city's manager's report,
It has a PowerPoint embedded in it that you'll go through.
that where this is going to be discussed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like we should have the PowerPoint beforehand then somehow.
Well, I guess as I'm saying this, there are other projects that might also be needed as well. We've been through the process of our budget to this point, and I guess I'm struggling with changing what we've come up with over this period of months and months.
No.
At this point, based on when.
I mean, it becomes a zero-sum game situation.
Exactly,
Effectively
right.
at this point that.
And, you know, I think we've heard a lot of good input on this issue. And, you know, the stormwater engineer said it's moved up. We will be doing another 5-year CIP next year. And, you know, it's just at this point with this budget where we are today, I frankly don't see that we can, you know, we can't raise the mill levy at this point.
No, that's what I was asking.
We can't, I don't know if we can raise the stormwater fee at this point. I mean,
I had just a question for staff,
Yeah.
if that's okay, one more. I just want to clarify, the stormwater projects that are in this budget, Matt, which is the Naismith Drainage Channel, the 17th and Alabama project, and the concrete channel, no, not the concrete channel, but those two. Are you saying that those need to be addressed before we take care of anything downstream from there? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes.
And if we do it the other way around, then that will cause an issue?
It potentially could cause an issue. So anytime you defer maintenance on something, you're going to end up causing problems. You either pay now or you pay a lot later. So one of the things that we talked about, and I kind of got out of sorts because we went out of order for my PowerPoint, but when the commission first looked at this back in '96, the original consultant said, hey, we need to fund this at $4 an ERU. Well,
Right.
priorities were changed at that time, and they decided just to go with 2. So now granted, that was just a 4-year difference there when they jumped up to 3 and then 6 by the time they jumped up to the fully funded at 4. So
let me just interject for a minute. My understanding of your presentation was that the project at 17th is going to increase the flow into the Naismith ditch.
it's going to, yes, it's going to
Okay.
improve the
And so
flow as it gets
the
in.
reason that you need to fix Naismith first is because you want to fix it before you increase the flow into it.
Correct.
Is that all part of that Jayhawk drainage area?
No, Jayhawk's on the other side. This is a different watershed. This would be Naismith Channel.
So if it's a different watershed, does that mean that the Jayhawk watershed's collecting water from this drainage area?
No,
I guess I'm just a little confused. Maybe we're getting too deep here in the weeds. But if they're different watersheds, do they need to be?
there are different watersheds. So, you know, Jayhawk is basically this watershed here, and then Naismith comes down. You're on different sides of the divide. So Jayhawk, if I'm going to drop of water and I fall in the Jayhawk watershed, I'm headed off
To
to
Wakarusa.
the Kansas River. If I'm in Naismith, I go to the Wakarusa.
Yeah.
So you're on different sides of Mount Oregon.
So why do you need to do the Naismith Channel before you would work on like a project like this?
The Naismith Channel and 17th and Alabama are in the same watershed.
Okay. But the flow goes in towards the Wakarusa.
Correct.
And if the Jayhawk,
They're not, those two are not related as
Right.
far as that, yeah.
but the project at 8th and Ohio is in the Jayhawk drainage
Correct.
area. So that's total different flow towards the Kansas River. So why is it important to do the Naismith first if it's a total different drainage basin?
Because that's what I'm concerned about, that slope protection is failing, and if we lose that on one of our flash floods, that needs.
So it's a matter of priority, not
Yes.
that
Yes,
the
it does.
Naismith drainage is going to impact the Jayhawk.
Correct.
Okay.
What my understanding was is that you could lose lanes of Naismith
You
if
have
you had
the
that
potential
issue.
to.
Well, I was just, it
Yeah.
sounded like they were connected.
No, I'm sorry if I misrepresented
hydraulically.
that. No, it was a
they're not.
priority thing.
I didn't
It
think so,
wasn't-
but
No,
I
it
was confused.
wasn't a cross watershed.
The potential is because of the maintenance problems on the Naismith ditch,
Okay.
that we could lose street in a flash flood.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And so that's why it's such a high priority.
correct.
I'd be curious to know, we have in here 2 different street sweepers, one for next year and one the year after. Is there a way to just delay those another 2 years and bump this project, 800 Ohio, before those? What's the projected cost on 800 Ohio, do you think, just ballpark?
Well, it depends on the on the two alternatives that I provided. You had 600,000 for the smaller one, and it's 1.9 for the other one.
So the street sweepers are a little under 300,000 each, so if we bump those out 2 years, then we would have that.
Well, I can't speak to where we're at on the life cycle cost of the sweepers, but I would imagine Robert's got those where they need to be in order to replace those.
And Matt,
get
your
some salvage
comment
value
was
back.
that the $600 route is not your recommendation anyway.
Correct.
I mean, would essentially be wasting the 600
We'd
if we
be
decided
wasting
to
that
do.
little bitty purple
If
piece on that.
we decide, yeah.
Yes.
Because your thought is we need to address the entire drainage basin.
Yes, yeah. Because then there's another project that's on to the southwest of this, because I do them in phases where you always start on the downstream side of your project and work your way upstream, so that whatever you improve isn't causing problems. So if you make your system more efficient upstream and you haven't improved downstream, you're going to cause problems for yourself. So you start as low as you can in the watershed and work your way up.
Yeah.
We were talking about a lot of design issues that would be for next year. That 600,000, if we were to delay these street sweepers by a year or two, that would pay for the design and engineering of this 800 Ohio project, wouldn't it?
Typically, your engineering costs are anywhere from 6 to 10% of your projected construction costs.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I feel like that's a good compromise in seeing the project move a little more in the future than long-term.
I guess my only caution on that would be is if you're going to jump this project ahead of the other two Group 1 projects, you're going to have the neighbors from both of those up here.
No, not the Group 1 projects, the street sweepers.
Oh.
I think that the process that I'm hearing you're going through with the video surveillance of the system and kind of a reprioritization of what we have seems reasonable to me, and I'm willing to trust that process. And I think when we're talking about the budget, that's our job, is to make really difficult decisions, and sometimes they suck, and we have to make the least worst decision that we can. And I think that that's really difficult, and it doesn't feel good. But I'm hearing due diligence on behalf of everything you all are doing in making this happen.
I can tell you as a result of the discussions on this project, I've specifically directed the TV camera. We're doing everything in this Jayhawk watershed. We're doing everything in the 17th and Alabama watershed. And then I'm having to do everything in the 19th and Maple to make sure we have the priorities straight. And if something's changed, then that'll move things up or down depending upon those. But those are the first three we're looking at.
Well, I would be okay with moving ahead with the budget if we give staff the potential to rearrange items. Since we've already capped it, we can't change that.
I think we have to approve the budget and the expenditures as shown and not just cede authority to the staff to willy-nilly.
I'd have to bring them back to this commission anyway. I don't have that authority.
I would just like to add, I think, I appreciate that, Leslie. One thing that I'm concerned about is if we try to get this project, this project going even next year, that my concern is that we aren't going to look at it comprehensively. Because if we don't look at that entire drainage basin, then I'm concerned that we're not going to get a full project that's going to address the entire issue of that, because there's been so much going up on campus, a lot of buildings going up, which causes more surface water runoff, and if we don't look at that as part of this whole project, then we're just basically not spending money correctly, I don't think. So I don't want to rush into forcing an engineering design. I think we need to look at it comprehensively. The budget as it's written, I mean, we've gone through a lot of public comment on this, and I'm comfortable with going through with this, but next year I would like to see that this project get a better look and check the priority of it, because something needs to be done.
I thought that's what you were going to do next year with your new TV.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
The wheels of that are already in motion, because I've already got the TV truck going out to look at those to see if it can change and move up in priority for that very reason.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
And I just want us to be able to
I don't want to piecemeal it.
Yeah.
We're trying to come to our meeting of our minds at this point. Thank you, Matt.
So I'm comfortable with moving forward with what we got, provided with the caveat that next year this project has got to be somehow addressed.
Mm-hmm. That's basically what I was saying.
Thanks, Matt.
First time I seen him in a suit.
Dressed up. So, further conversation among commissioners, or are we ready to adopt a budget?
I would move that we approve ordinance number 9554, approving and appropriating the 2019 City of Lawrence operating and 2019-23 capital improvement plan budget.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Nanda, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. We're on to commission items.
I had one commission item that was, had a citizen request, basically, that wanted to make the request in public comment but was not able to make it. Just asked that on a future city manager's report, we address the progress of where we're at with our skydiving policy. I think we had approved that, I want to say February, and so we're looking, at this point, 6 months past approval. And I think there's a feeling of a lot of people involved that we haven't really gone a lot of places in 6 months. So they're hoping for an update on that.
We had a meeting with the FAA, a couple of the top administrators. Remind me who was all in that meeting? Vice Mayor?
They were at Kansas City, the
Tom,
FFA office out of Kansas City, both the
Chuck,
director.
Brandon. And I posed the question, what's the capacity of our airport, and to what extent are we utilizing that capacity? And I think that's something that we should be taking a look at. We put a lot of money into that airport, and if we have underutilized capacity, I think their estimate was, what, 10% of utilization?
5 to 10 is what they said, 5 to 10% right now.
Yeah. So that's something I'd like to kind of task the Airport Advisory Board to consider along with staff for the future. It kind of ties into what you're talking about there, Matthew, I think. But you were in the meeting. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I think that was the thing that struck me the most, was they had indicated that we're only using 5 to 10% capacity, which, you know, if we're trying to increase use of the airport, revenues, the whole thing, that's all part of it.
It's too bad Michael Davidson's not still here. Michael, you out here? No,
No,
okay.
he's not. Is that we could, there's a lot more we can use it for, and this is one way to do it, and we need to get moving on it.
Mm-hmm. I think his specific concern dealt with the fact that there was a feeling of, when we left that February meeting, there was a feeling of, okay, the commission has made a decision on the direction we're to go with this, and at this point it's just a matter of developing some small policy. And as we've seen on hundreds of issues over the years, we oftentimes send stuff back to city staff to refine, and the refinement process has differing lengths of time associated with it, but I think the expectation of the community would be that upon adoption of a policy, we probably should see some enactment of that within 6 months. And I think there's a general feeling that that has not occurred.
So do we have any update on that at all?
Chuck, you want to update him?
I think I came back, and I don't have the exact dates, earlier this summer or spring, and gave an update, and we had some more public comment. I did receive some comments from the FAA on some of the fees, so we made all those adjustments. At that time, I want to say it was June-ish, we were looking at trying to get the waiver put together and answer the additional questions that were asked. We do have the waiver together. We do have pretty much a new aviation advisory board. I think we have at least 4 new members. Next week, I was going to present those policies to them, see if they have any comments, but just really bring them up to speed. And then we're ready to set it out on the website, and people can start applying.
So you think basically after next week it will be a go?
unless the board comes up with some other concerns, you know, these are all new members that they want to bring back to the commission or something like that, but I don't see that. The commission's already approved this.
I was going to say, we've taken a vote on it.
You've
so-
already approved the policies, yes.
Well, I appreciate their concerns. I think that we ought to move forward with policy, and if they have some concerns, perhaps we can amend policy in the future, but
Can do that.
I mean, we've heard from the aviation board that existed at the time. We've taken a vote on it here. I'd like to see that policy be enacted.
That was the intent.
So you bring the policy back?
I wasn't necessarily because it's been approved. I was just
Yeah.
going to update the board members so they knew what was going to occur, and then it would be put out there.
So do you need another update?
Our board meets Thursday.
I'm not, I would prefer action over updates, frankly. I just think that if we're in a position where we've taken a vote, if the Aviation Advisory Board is not going to lead to an immediate amendment, I'm not even sure why we're waiting. I mean, it's good that we inform them of what's happening as they're new to their position, but I don't think we hold policy based on the fact we've had a few membership changes on an advisory board.
Sure, and I just got the comments from the FAA. It's been a few weeks.
I mean, to put it, as a metaphor, if we had some changeover on the planning commission, we wouldn't stop a project and say, hold on, these people need to be notified of what's happening at 23rd. We would move the project forward, and I would like this to be treated similarly.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chuck.
I'll consider you updated.
Other commission items?
So when I was voting today, one of the poll workers asked my sons what their best things that happened in the summer were. And one said the St. Louis Zoo, fine. But the other said his tour of the wastewater treatment plant was his favorite thing this summer. And so I wanted to thank staff. It reminded me that I've been wanting to thank and to have Tom pass along to all the staff who've taken the time to give me tours of the department. And we've walked by the water treatment facility 3 times now, one of them on the way to vote, and they try to peek in the tank. So it's really awakened their fascination about water. And I've learned so much from all of the staff who've been willing to take the time to give me tours of the department, to answer the multitude of really smart and really dumb questions that I've had about the processes and what goes on and how folks do their jobs. So I really, really appreciate their willingness to do that and your willingness to set those up. So thank you.
Yeah, they're very proud of the work they do, and they really appreciate, quite frankly, equally to your appreciation, you coming out and taking an interest in seeing what they have. So that offer is good for everybody. If even if it's a particular site, we'll work it into a schedule to have you see it, because they are very proud of the work they do, and they enjoy showing the elected officials, what they do.
It is state-of-the-art out there.
Yeah.
It is wonderful.
That's all I had. Thank you.
We had a request from Dr. Domer in public comment to put on the historic bricks and limestone curbing on a regular agenda. I think it might be more appropriate to a work session. And I'd be real interested in touring the brickyard too, just to see what we got.
You call up anytime, we'll take you right to the brickyard.
I thought that
Wear your
we had,
galoshes.
I thought when we had the
Rainy
discussion on East Ninth Street that there was some provisions there as to what to do with those bricks and limestone curbing, if I remember right.
They stockpile all that.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
potential, substitute use
Right.
where those are currently being used
Yeah.
or will historically continue to be used. So they have a stockpile of that material so that they can match things up. That material doesn't go to landfill.
Right.
We just did a small project on 12th Street in between Vermont and Kentucky, and I saw that, and it's a nice section. I mean, it was a big section if you're a brick, but a small section if you're just somebody zipping through it.
Yeah. I wasn't really sure about what he was asking. It almost sounds like he would like to redesign or use them in a redesign of that street improvement. I'm not sure. My suggestion before we plan an agenda is for our staff to reach out to him maybe get to the bottom of what his ask is.
I
And then we'll
think
bring
that'd
you
be
that
good.
back.
I mean, I'm bringing it up because we need to have a conversation about whether or not we're interested in hearing about something. And so if I'm the only one who feels this way, then that's okay. I'll just go tour the Brickyard and that'll be it. But if other people want to learn about brick streets.
I had the sense he was asking more than just for you to tour the Brickyard.
I
Yeah, he asked for a work
think he'd
session.
like to talk to us about brick streets. I think, it's an opportunity to learn. And I mean,
I just want to make sure that whatever we put on as an agenda, that we get it.
And I don't want to stop the 9th Street project to talk about bricks, okay? I mean, that's not, but the opportunity to learn more about brick streets, I think is, and, from staff and from, a historian. So, and again, if I'm the only one who wants to do it, I can go talk to Dennis and tour the brick.
I'm from East Lawrence. We talk about brick streets all the time.
Yeah. I'd like to know more detail about what he was really.
So if you
what he
guys
was
would reach
wanting.
out to him, and then we can,
What his ask was.
Got it.
Yeah.
Because I know
Okay.
we've talked about the brick streets and
Yeah.
curbing, and KT's been quite the advocate for that, so.
Yeah, and I thought the 9th Street plan had something in it too, that she was mentioning.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what the latest is.
I have been working on appointments lately. I have some things to talk about with regard to appointments. The Senior Resource Center is a governing board. It's a recipient of significant financial assistance from the city. City Commission representation is allowable, I think, and useful. And I was going to ask Commissioner Ananda if you'd be willing to serve on this governing board. There is a vacancy. And if you just think about it, and if you,
Can you tell me meeting times?
no, I can't.
Okay.
Sorry.
That would be a consideration.
Yeah. Additionally, the Sister Cities has their new organization and bylaws, and they've provided in their bylaws a position for the mayor or the mayor's delegate. I'd actually like to fill that role with your agreement. I think we could put that on the consent agenda as an appointment for next week, if you guys are okay with me doing that.
I'm fine, yeah.
Okay.
That's good. That's good.
And we had a discussion in our strategic plan on advisory boards, and I'd just like to follow up on that with a couple of things. We have the Senior Resource Board. There's also something called the Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging, and there's also a third board called the Douglas County Advocacy Council on Aging. I'm trying to figure out how these groups interrelate, and the Douglas County Advocacy Council on Aging is a joint board with the county, and I'd like for us to be looking at whether or not we could combine or transfer some of the responsibilities of these groups and come up with fewer, frankly, organizations. And that, again, would be a conversation with the county. If it's okay, we could throw that on the discussion with the county. We also need to talk to the various groups, so, we've had some, but I mean, again, this is my idea. If you don't want to do that, then.
No, I've been looking at the boards, and there does seem to be quite a bit of overlap in that area, the senior citizen area and the aging. So I think it would be
Yeah.
good to continue to look at that.
Yeah, there's another board that we have talked about recently too, which is the Mental Health Board. I think it'd be a good idea for us to talk to the county about that as well. So we have a joint meeting coming up, if we can try to get those on that agenda, if you're okay with that.
Thanks for your work on those.
You'll get there. Similarly with the, we've got the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee, which predates the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. I think the Homeless Issues Advisory Committee meets quarterly and has a much smaller focus than the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. And I'm just wondering if we might consider, as part of our strategic plan, maybe looking at combining those groups or somehow streamlining that. again, we've talked about the Social Service Funding Advisory Board and the Community Development Advisory Committee. I can't remember where we were on that. Maybe, Diane, you could help me with that.
There actually were some staff discussion on these boards today, and I think if it would be okay with the governing body for us just to bring a report back to the city commission, maybe with some recommendations that relate to the homeless issues advisory board. I think that's the right, and the other two boards that you mentioned.
Yeah. I'm really interested in making sure that we're optimizing the staff time that we use in the liaisons and actually getting as much as we can out of these groups.
So we could certainly follow up with an agenda item if that would be appropriate, Mayor.
I think that'd be good for me.
I think that'd be good, yeah.
Okay.
That's the direction?
That seems to be the direction. Yes.
That's the direction.
Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate the staff attention to this issue very much. Any other commission items? Okay, let's go on to the city manager's report.
Well, I think we probably went deeper into Matt's report than what we had anticipated going into, but I'd asked Matt to return and maybe give a broader perspective than the specific discussion about the specific project we previously talked about. Get back into the plan a little more generally, so to speak, and I think that will inform some of the context that I think the commissioners need. So you have 7.5 minutes.
I can do it in 30 seconds. So one of the things that I was going to touch base and make you aware of, because I don't think a lot of people are aware of what, one of the things that I got when I was first in this job is I was amazed at how many people thought that all of the stormwater was treated at the wastewater treatment plant. So in our infrastructure currently we have 160 miles of pipe, 60 miles of open channel like this concrete shown, 7,200 structures, and then we also have about 380 centerline miles of street sweeping that we do in town. And then along with that, our staffing is 11 and a half full-time employees, and then we have administrative assistant, a field crew, field supervisor. We actually have a GIS intern that we're funding for this summer, a project inspector, myself, and then 2 utility operators. And so with the 96 master plan, which I alluded to earlier, that was started, they wanted a way to fund the projects that they had identified in the plan. And so in 97, we began billing for $2 an ERU, and then with each succession, in fact, now this is, since that's no longer proposed at the bottom of the page, since you approved the rate increase tonight. And then back to the group 1, 2, and 3 projects. I won't rehash what we had there since we've already talked about it. And then, with those 41 projects that were listed in the master plan, we've completed 16 of them, with 8 of the 11 group 1 projects being done, and 2 of the remaining 3 are currently on our 5-year CIP. And then I won't go through the projects again. And then once again, the selection that we had and impact factors. And that was pretty much it. Not quite 90 seconds, but less than 7 minutes.
With that, I'll move on to the next reports. Okay. Sales tax reports, June year-to-date sales tax, I just point out, saw a 1.8% increase. I think it's just slightly below what we estimated for the year, but we try to keep an eye on that. It's such a major source of our revenue. Update on a question that Commissioner Ananda had raised, and that was, could the city mandate safe bar training for all city drinking venues? And just a little background, Safe Bar was created in Lawrence by the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center program. approximately 7 years ago and is designed to train bar staff members on sexual violence. The goal of the program is to treat bars as an ally in combating sexual violence, and with staff being trained in skills to intervene when sexual misconduct occurs. Staff has concluded that it is possible to require licensees to undergo safe bar training in order to receive a local drinking established license from the city. If the commission would like this item returned to it for consideration, staff will draft an ordinance mandating such training. There'll probably be some fees for that, and we'd probably build that in as a part of the process back to the establishment if it's my recommendation. So just so you know that that's kind of where we are with that. If you want to mull it over, or if you want to.
I'm very interested in pursuing that, and also I want to make sure that there are some bars that apparently have a lot of volunteer help, so that when we talk about staff training, that includes volunteers. Okay. I think regulating whoever these volunteers are might be quite helpful for law enforcement as well.
I agree. I think looking at how Wichita has looked at the funding issue might be worthwhile, and I assume that's something that you would do.
Yeah.
It's nice to have a model in the state already.
Yeah, it's good. I think that's a good idea.
So I'll take that as not direction, but as
move forward.
A strong inclination that that's where you want to head, and we'll direct staff accordingly. Mental health board update. There's been some confusion about the mental health board versus the Burt Nash, and I think you're going to work on that probably through the joint meeting. We might even bring that issue up in the joint city-county school district meeting. We had talked about potentially doing that as kind of a larger kickoff into looking at all of our intergovernmentals and trying to figure out some priority base to get back into those. I guess I'm just used to a much more defined structure on these types of arrangements, and I think many of them have grown kind of tired in terms of how reflective they are of current conditions. They need to be updated. And I see that across a number of agreements that the city has entered into. I suspect that has a tie-in back to our accounts receivable issues with agreements and things. So we're addressing those issues on accounts receivable, but there's these intergovernmentals that I think we need to start just deliberately taking one at a time and going back through them. Whether there's a willingness with our partner, remains to be seen, but I think a good kickoff, Mayor, would be for you to raise this particular board as maybe an example of how things, didn't get capped when this transition occurred, or however that happened. There seems to be a real gap in the history of this thing, why this went the way it did. So I think Diane has already communicated with county staff to put this item on, and it's an agenda item.
Well, we have the issue of the joint appointment
right
between the city and the county that we need to talk about too. Right. And I want to be very clear that this is an agreement not just between the city and the county, but also the center, which is the Burt Nash Center.
Right.
So they have to be included in discussions about this as well, I would think.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah.
But I think it needs to be raised as an issue, for the public to understand too.
I think we could hopefully get that onto the agenda of that city-county school board meeting.
The other
Thank you. Appreciate
boards
it.
that you mentioned, yeah.
The next item is the Women's Foundation Appointments Project strives to enhance diversity by encouraging women to apply for appointments to boards and committees. In conjunction with the city's goal of increasing the diversity of advisory boards and committee staff, has learned about the appointments project of the Women's Foundation. We have an attachment included. Staff believes that participating in this project, along with other cities in the Kansas metro area, would help promote diversity. The Women's Foundation promotes equity and opportunity for women of all ages using research, philanthropy, and policy solutions to make meaningful change. Staff plans on contacting the Women's Foundation to join the appointments project to further this diversified goal. So this is just a point of information for you. I've been in one state where they actually had gender balance requirements, and I think I've mentioned that before. Gender is one of our issues that we certainly wish to diversify on, and there's others as well that, but I think this is a way to promote that issue in terms of gender and hopefully getting a better balance, a more diverse balance on our boards and commissions. And that's something that the commission certainly can have an impact on directly.
Right. And I appreciate that. I think this is a great idea. I guess what I'd like to see is kind of a point-in-time census as we start this, saying what is the makeup at this point as we get into that.
Well, actually, Diane can probably report on that a little bit, because we did a voluntary survey as to identifiers, as to, backgrounds for our members. It was voluntary.
Yeah, we did that a few months ago and provided a report. What I could do is provide that report again for the commission. We are also asking the new people who are expressing interest as part of their interest form to voluntarily fill out the same information that we asked in that survey. So I think the challenge with, we have very recent information. It probably has not changed very much, with the exception of the few appointments that have been made between the time that was done and now.
Yeah.
So I think we have a good baseline now. And then our intention was to resurvey every 3 years or so the full group of volunteers for advisory boards and committees. But we will also have kind of hopefully a rolling information as those appointments and interest forms come in. That is information that certainly the mayor will have.
What was the response rate on the survey?
That I can't recall off the top of my head, Mayor, I'm sorry.
I would think that some of this information could be obtained from liaisons.
The challenge is with the broadness of the diversity definition, it's very difficult for.
Well, this is very specific to women.
Well,
The gender issue is fairly easy
That's
to
what I'm asking for.
ascertain.
We're talking about the Women's Foundation, and, this is pretty specific on that one point. That's the data point that I'm interested in.
That is, but as you may recall, the diversity goal was broader than that. And
I realize that, yeah.
we tried to do
And I support the entire diversity goal. But when I went and read, there was information about how a city's appointments were increased from, 33% to 42% in a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the thing I'm trying to say. Let's get a baseline as we do this, so we know where we started.
So I went to the website for the Women's Foundation and looked around, and it does seem to market to a very specific population of women, particularly white middle-class women, it appeared. And so I want to just make sure that we're being as intersectional as possible when we're looking at this, and not just relying on the Women's Foundation to increase diversity on our boards as well.
That's a great point.
Moving on. All right. Single-use plastics, remember, we had a group of our young folks in the community come forward and promote this issue along with their teachers. The Sustainability Advisory Board this issue was referred to them, and they voted to adopt this issue of single-use plastic as a board priority at the July 11 meeting, and the work group is in the process of being formed to research and develop a recommendation. So I think that's an appropriate way for that issue to be dealt with, at least in the interim. Food Policy Council hosted the statewide symposium, Harvesting Opportunity in Kansas. Douglas County Food Council, a joint city-county advisory board, took the lead to host a statewide symposium in May, Harvesting Opportunity in Kansas, at the Kansas KU Business School in Capitol Federal Hall. Over 120 people attended the event from food and farm councils and economic development agencies across Kansas. A new interactive story map has been launched, capturing the keynote speeches and main ideas discussed during the day. Additional tools for advancing food systems economic development will be released later this summer. And you recall, we took action at the council level to advise our Congress about the concerns we had about diminishing the Southwest Chief Train services, more specifically doing some interconnects with bus service rather than maintaining and continuing the complete train service. The Senate did pass an amendment that would fund that program, and so that seems to be moving in the right direction. Future agenda items, the police facility bond resolution will be on August 21st. A text amendment, land development code will be on, and the transportation alternative grants. Queens Road will be on September 4th, as well as the downtown solid waste rates. And 9/11, the meeting with the commission and workshop, will have the receipt of the an adoption for final housing study and a citizen survey presentation from the consultant. But that one got moved, right? Yeah. We have been going back and forth trying to get that resolved. I think we're now at October 4, and that's mutual. I would tell you that we've had some conflicts at our end, and they've had some at their end, the consultant, so it's now at October 4. However, we have done a complete release of all those documents at the same time. Next item is work sessions, fire medical department standard of cover. That is still scheduled. And the priority-based budgeting presentation by the consultant will take place on August 14th. That's next week. So that's all I'm going to comment on future agendas at this point.
Thank you. Public comment on the city manager's report?
Hello, my name is Sarah Merriman. I live at 6212 West 22nd Court. A lot of talk's been about Project 23 tonight, so I will skip some of the repetitive parts. But I do want to just remind everybody that the plan did originally call for the projects to be completed in priority order, particularly this Group 1. And that Group 1 was to be completed in 5 years. Group 1 is yet to be completed in 22 years, although efforts are being made. We all have the benefit of hindsight looking back at how all this happened, but I would like to talk about the funding. I'll have to move it around a little bit. These projects here are the projects, 16 projects that have been completed so far. It has the capital costs that the master plan thought they would be, the actual construction cost of these projects, the year they were completed, and the stormwater revenue that was generated during that time period. The first 13 projects were completed by 2005 at a construction cost of $10 million, with stormwater revenue coming in at 16.7. No projects were completed from 2006 to 2014, while an additional $26.4 million came in revenue. The Maple Street Pump Station was completed in 15 for $6 million, and that was funded by the infrastructure sales tax. And 23rd and Osdale was completed $3 million in 2017. And I do believe that was on a 2018 CIP and somehow completed in 17. The total cost, actual cost of all these projects, construction, was about $13 million, while the stormwater revenue that came in was $52.5 million. There were obviously bonds issued for this because there was debt service payment of about $14 million. and there were transfers out of stormwater during this time period of almost $7 million. These numbers leave me wondering why the Stormwater Master Plan hasn't been followed more closely and worked as intended, and why more funding hasn't been available for these projects. I believe that if the master plan projects had been completed in the prescribed manner and time period laid out in the master plan, Project 23 would have already been completed, and we wouldn't be here discussing this tonight. Thank you.
I don't think I understand what you're saying. Is it all on there? Oh. There we go. We had those in the packet of stuff for the commissioners. My name is Donna Giesler, and I live at 6212 West 22nd Court, but we are co-owners of 812 Ohio, in full disclosure, which is why we're so interested. The Jayhawk Watershed Stormwater Report introduced tonight showed the original plan for Project 23. It consisted of two parts: moving the line into the public right-of-way and increasing the diameter of the line down 8th Street. Project 23, as Matt mentioned earlier, was originally intended to go down the alley because it was thought at the time that the line ran here. The line does not run there. It runs over here and it's under the house. And so this is option A, the best option of the two, because it eliminates, you also have sanitary sewer lines that penetrate this line. They run through it. And so you have the potential of raw sewage going down this line into the river. So it does complete what Project 23 wanted to do. We had meetings with the city staff this year, and in the plan, it was $463,000 to run this length. In our March meeting, it was $600,000. In one part of the report you got tonight, it was $1 million, and in another part of the report, it's $1.9 million. So I would just ask that we look at this and see what the real costs of that are. Plan B does not complete it, as Matt said. It does not fix this problem, and it doesn't get it out from under the house. The line we're talking about on the Jayhawk watershed looks like this. It's, this would be 8th and Ohio, and these are the houses we were just looking at. And this is the line as it runs up, and the top of this line, I'll put it right there, is the KU campus. So this is a major stormwater system. It runs through the core of the city, and it handles all of the stormwater from the highest point of the KU campus from the north side of Jayhawk Boulevard down to the river. In the past 22 years, there have been major building projects, which are shown here in blue, on the upstream portion of this line on and around the north side of KU's campus. In the next 5 years, KU has spent $300 million building out the stadium complex, adding seating. This plan dramatically increases hard surface area and will greatly increase the velocity and the volume of stormwater down this line. May I just close?
You may
closing
close,
part.
yes.
Thank you, sir. This section of the 107-year-old stone stormwater line needs immediate attention. We ask that a solution be found that immediately addresses the flooding issues at 8th and Ohio and reroutes this from under the house. Thank you, sir. Thank you, commissioners.
Other public comment?
I had stepped out for a little bit. I was just wondering, has there been any mention about when the resolution to reduce the fine for marijuana to like $25 is that going to be scheduled for any upcoming work sessions?
October 9th.
Okay, thank you.
We're waiting for you to come back.
Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to our calendar. Any calendar items?
Thursday, August 23rd is the Just Food Chef's Table event.
Okay.
It is a ticketed event, and so if there's more than 3 of us going, that probably needs to be on it.
I guess there's also the Taste of Lawrence. You've got that on there on September 6th. Yeah.
Are more than 3 of you going?
I'm not going.
I will be there, but it doesn't sound like anybody else. So.
I don't know.
Yeah, not for sure.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Anything else? Well, thank you all. I would entertain a motion.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second. We have a motion from Vice Mayor Larson, second from Commissioner Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.